All right, let's talk Rams Vikings. I got to be honest, this is the game, other than the one my team is playing in this weekend, that I am most excited to watch, I think. The more I was preparing for this video, the more excited I got. There's so much interesting things here, so I'll try not to talk your ear off and have this video go on for forever, but yeah, there's a ton of exciting stuff to talk about. So just so you know how this video is going to work, I'm going to start off with some charts using some numbers, things of that nature. We will then get into some film. I have actually a decent amount of film I want to talk about here. And then I'll give my predictions on how this side of the ball is going to go. This is purely talking about Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay going up against Brian Flores. Should be really interesting. And then I'll make another video where I preview the other side of the ball. In that video coming out in a day or two, I will also give my final score predictions. So yeah, let's just jump into it. First, let's get into the chart I tend to start these videos off with. This is the chart. So these are where each of these team ranks in terms of PFF grades in each positional category on this side of the ball. So you see, PFF hasn't been crazy about Matthew Stafford this year, only 19th best passing. That does factor in a Jimmy Garoppolo game, but still, I don't entirely disagree, to be honest. I don't think this has been Stafford's best season. I will say, though, he's had moments where he's looked, I mean, like a top one quarterback in football. Like him at his best is still up there with anybody. We saw the Bills game, and even the last time these two teams played in week 8 of this season, he was on fire in that game, and we'll talk about why. They also, they get open really well. Third best receiving, big part of that is Puka Nacua. Minnesota's okay. Coverage-wise, according to PFF, 16th. Definitely, they do things differently. There's a lot of interesting schematic stuff, so don't just look at their numbers. And I think a big way you have to look at that is with pass rush. They're 25th in pass rush, according to PFF. And that just means, like, how often are they winning their one-on-one straight up? Not as often, according to PFF, but they blitz so much. And again, we'll get into what that means. The Rams don't pass block very well. 30th in pass block. They do run block pretty well, so it's a good run blocking unit against a good run defense unit, according to PFF. Although, again, PFF not huge on Kyren Williams of the running back for the Rams. I wouldn't get too excited if I'm a Minnesota Vikings fan. I think Williams is actually better than maybe the PFF grades say. He does get a lot of carries with a good pass block, or with a good run blocking unit. So I get you could argue he's a bit overhyped, but I think it's pretty good. So we'll get into all that. Let's talk blitzing now. So these are Matthew Stafford's numbers, his PFF grades and his passer rating when he's blitzed versus when he is not blitzed. Obviously, Brian Flores blitzes more than any coach in the league. The blitz rate for the Vikings is first in football as of in the regular season this year. You see Stafford's PFF grade mostly the same whether he's getting blitzed or not blitzed, so you're not really affecting him too much, but the team around him performs better when he is blitzed, and a big part of that is what they do with Puka Nacua. When we get into film, we'll touch more on that. But if we go to this chart right here, which could actually be something that's really important heading into this this week, you see that what you're looking at here is every receiver for the Rams, how they perform against man and how they perform against zone. The two stats I put for each of these categories are PFF grades and then yards per route ran. You see Puka Nacua is just like ridiculous, like over 3.5 yards per route ran is like an absurd number, and he's doing it both versus man and versus zone. You're not slowing down Puka Nacua. I don't care what you do. He's going to get yards. You see Cooper Kupp has slowed down a bit. Right, he still is really good against zone, not as dominant against man. If you remember, I think the Super Bowl year, he was like over 3 yards per route ran against man, and the PFF grade is sub 60 there. So he'll still get touches. He's still really good against zone. Not quite the same against man. You have some other guys, Demarcus Robinson, Tutu Atwell, even Colby Parkinson, and I threw Kyren Williams in there as well, but Williams is just not a factor against man. He'll do stuff against zone a little bit, but he's just not a factor against man. They're throwing to receivers if it's man, and they're throwing to Nacua if it's man or zone. That's kind of where they're at. The last time these two teams played, and again, it's week 8. Obviously, a lot has changed with both of these two teams since then, but it's still worth noting. I mean, the Vikings have lost to 2 teams this year. It's the Lions twice and the Rams. The Rams, they had a really good passing day. They did. You see Matthew Stafford's stats, not just the 4 touchdowns. He did throw an interception, but also really good yards per attempt, 279 yards on just 34 attempts. Really good stuff. And you see the receiving. Nacua was a huge part of it, over 100 yards. They spread the wealth around a little bit too. Kupp did also have 50 and a touchdown, so he was a factor in this game. As for the rushing, Kyren Williams, he had some nice runs, then he had some runs where he got stopped. The overall yards per carry is like a solid 4.2, that's totally fine. But it was very much he would get a nice run and then get stopped for no yards. It felt like the first time they played. I don't think the running game to me is going to be what makes or breaks this game. I think it's going to be the passing game. So let's get into the film, what I really want to talk about, because I just think this chess match should be so fascinating. So let's start off with the whole thing, right? This is the game, essentially, of you see the Vikings are going to sell as though they are blitzing right here. Well, what are ways that you can beat the blitz? Well, you can send a receiver down the field, throw it down the field. Okay, there's things like that, run slant routes, stuff like that. But there's also the screen pass game. That's what the Rams like to do, is they like to run screen passes. And if they're going to run a screen pass, how do you think they're going to do it? Well, they have 4 eligible receivers on the offense's right. Cooper Kupp's in that direction. That seems like a pretty good way to run the screen pass, right? In fact, that Vikings player is going to be running out in that direction, kind of assuming that might be what happens. Sometimes what Flores likes to do is he likes to sell as though he's blitzing, but then drop back and try and cover something like a screen pass. But here's what is kind of crazy about the Rams. That's what they're going to do. They're going to actually send an offensive lineman out to block, and Puka Nacua is going to be the one who gets the screen pass, the only eligible receiver on that side of the field. You might be thinking, well, wait a second, maybe you're not a math expert, but you can see that there's 2 Vikings players on that side of the field and only 1 blocker. That doesn't seem ideal. However, you see Stafford's going to quickly get it to Nacua. The first block is made. Nacua makes a guy miss, and they just get a free 12-yard gain, essentially. Nacua can do this every play. Like, this isn't something he does on occasion. This is just what he does. They had another screen pass on a blitz by the Vikings that was able to pick up a bunch of yards. The reality is, this is just a killer. And, I don't know if you want to be in this situation if you're the Vikings. There isn't really a counter for this if you're blitzing, other than hope your guys can shed blocks, but it's not that easy. And to be honest, going over here, another issue with this is that you can give up one-on-one matchups. I mean, you see right here, Nacua is in a one-on-one matchup. This actually isn't a blitz, but it is a one-on-one matchup, so that's why I wanted to include it. But as you see, I mean, look at how quickly Nacua wins. Stafford hits him immediately. And again, it's like a free 15-yard gain. I'm saying free. It's not free. I mean, Nacua is earning this. But Nacua is a number 1 receiver. He is an elite receiver. And to treat him differently because he plays the slot sometimes would be just stupid. No, this guy is elite. And he really kind of disrupts what Flores wants to do. So because of that, the first time these 2 teams played, the Vikings started off doing what they like to do, blitzing a lot, and they gave up touchdowns on back-to-back drives, and really pretty easy touchdowns on back-to-back drives, and they had to say, well, let's maybe mix things up a little. But one of the things that can still work is, okay, maybe you don't want to get rid of go off the blitz just yet. This is another thing I find really interesting. You see Stafford and how much he's communicating, right? Watch, they're going to cut to a different angle. You see him, he's getting everyone on the same page. He's moving, doing all this stuff. What is he doing here? He's getting everybody in position, right? You see the blocking concept now. Everyone is going to be blocked if the Vikings, even if they send a house, Stafford's okay. Stafford's so good he's been in the league for so long, he knows how to set his blocking. And so for some of these younger quarterbacks, Flores can kind of eat them alive because they don't know how to set their blocking. They can't read these plays. Stafford knows what he's doing. He's so good at this. And the Rams offensive line, even if they might not have the talent, they do typically do a good job at getting in position to make their blocks. But here's where maybe Flores has a chance to still make things happen. So you see the running back on this play. The running back isn't going to do anything too fancy. He looks towards the offense's left. If they need help blocking, he'll stay there. If not, then just run a check down route, essentially. But the Vikings are going to have a stunt here, essentially, where the edge rusher is going to run back towards the middle. And if he does that, well, really, the halfback's the only guy who could pick that up and make the block, right? This is essentially Flores using this intelligence of Stafford against him. He knows how Stafford is going to set his blocking assignment and then can scheme things around. As you see, the halfback doesn't pick it up because really, how could he? You're able to get a free pressure. Stafford throws, and unfortunately for the Vikings, there was a defensive holding on this play, so the Rams were able to keep the drive alive. But this is exactly what you want to have happen if you're in Minnesota. It can work. It can. And also, like, something like this, I know the PFF grades as a whole aren't great for Minnesota, but, like, they do have players who can win one-on-one matchups. And, like, something like this, for example, it's a one-on-one matchup. As you see, they're able to get this really immediate win. Stafford's in trouble. I mean, the Rams don't pass protect very well. There still is ways you can get pressure even if you don't blitz. On this play, actually, Stafford breaks out of this pressure somehow and throws a touchdown. Okay, he's not going to do that every time. You still want to get pressure if you can, but obviously he is still very good at stuff like this. But this is kind of what I think is so interesting about the blitzing stuff. I don't think it's a great idea. I mean, it didn't work out very well the first time. You have Puka Nacua, who's great against the blitz. Stafford's numbers are better against the blitz, but maybe you hope you can just get the occasional play to make things work. The flip side is, well, what if we don't blitz, right? Okay, what if we go over here? Sure, what Flores is known for is his cover zero blitzes and stuff of that nature, but they do other things, like, for example, play zone coverage. As I mentioned, the first time these two teams played, the Rams scored back-to-back touchdowns. Actually, both teams scored back-to-back touchdowns to start the game, and you kind of just said, like, okay, Vikings might have to just kind of try and do something different. They play zone, and right off the bat, it was better. As you see on this one, Stafford's going to try and hit Kupp, who, as we established, is still very good against zone, but hey, Vikings were able to win. You're getting more contested catches with doing something like this. You're making it tougher for the Rams to get their wins, and they started to get less wins. In fact, this one, it's going to be a 3rd down and 6 right here. It's a zone coverage concept. You have a receiver going, kind of trying to get into a gap in coverage. This was immediately after the halftime. This is the first drive after halftime for the Rams. You see Stafford's going to take the snap. He looks at that route that should be good against zone coverage, but he just either he overshoots it or he thought the receiver was going to do something different. Either way, he throws a pick. So, okay, all of a sudden, Vikings are thinking, all right, we got something. This is a game plan, and I would say I think they probably should play more zone in this game than they're used to. But the issue is, like, going over here, like, it just didn't last long. Like, the Rams pretty much quickly figured out what they had to do and were able to still drive down the field against zone coverage. This one, it's actually just a 3-man rush right here. But nonetheless, you're going to see that the Rams are able to quickly get this play to work, find a gap in coverage. The reality is, like, the Vikings, kind of like what we said, their defense is definitely greater than the sum of its parts. Like, it's so well coached, and kind of the blitzing and keeping other quarterbacks off balance is part of what makes it great. If they simply just drop back into coverage, they're not the same. You also have to worry about a play like this, where if you're just going to rush 4, could something like this happen, where it's a 2nd down and 8. You're going to see Stafford takes the snap, and I mean, I'm going to have to pause this for a second just for copyright reasons. Can't let the play go on for too long. You see Stafford's so well protected. I mean, this is nearly 5 seconds into the play, and he still has a completely clean pocket. This is just not what you want to have happen, because again, part of what makes the Vikings so good at getting pressure is how they scheme stuff up with blitzes. If they don't do that, it might not work as well. Stafford is ultimately eventually able to find a receiver who gets into a soft spot in the zone coverage, which is just going to happen. So that's what I find so fascinating is, what do you do? What is the poison you pick if you're Minnesota? So that's what I think is just so interesting about this matchup. You have a situation where if you're the Minnesota Vikings, you have something you're really good at. The blitzing stuff is something you're really good at. It's disrupted most teams. The Rams are a team that actually is kind of built to defeat that, and it's not usually a great strategy to play the way the Vikings play, and this is where you get into an issue, where do you say, you know what, we're going to go away from what makes us great because they're also great at that, and play to our opponent's weaknesses, but the issue is you're also now playing to your own weaknesses. I don't know if there's a great plan for the Vikings. I think if they blitz a lot, you'll see a lot of good Nacua screens. You'll see Nacua just win one-on-ones, and I think that they'll struggle. And if you can't really double-team Nacua if you're blitzing. You could try to play some man coverage and double Nakua. I think that could be interesting, but that's just not at all what the Vikings do too much. They do on occasion, and I actually think that might be an interesting strategy, but they didn't try it at all the first time they played. So I don't know. That's something to keep an eye out for. That's probably, I would think, the best game plan as of right now. They could drop back and play zone a lot as well. If you do, though, I just think, I mean, we saw the Bills try that. I just think Stafford will pick you apart if you do it. I think you have to still throw some blitzes. You can't do it every time. You probably have to be better at disguising and try and take Nakua out of the play as much as you can. Because I don't care how good Gilmore is, Nakua is just one of those guys who one guy can't cover him. So that's how I view it. So final predictions page for this video now, which is what some people just skip towards and ignore everything else. I always say, I think what I enjoy about these videos is the first 95%, the kind of figuring out how I view all this stuff, what can be made of all of it, and then the predictions is just kind of it's an educated guess, right? But the Rams' offensive points per drive on the year is 2.06. The Vikings' defensive points per drive on the year is a great 1.70. But the first time, it was double that. The Rams had 3.5 points per drive. Hard to imagine that getting replicated. That's such a high number. But my guess is we still do see a really good Rams performance. I'm going to go 2.8 points per drive, which is definitely higher than the Rams typically do. I just think it's a good matchup. I do, and I'm worried if I'm a Vikings fan because of this matchup. Because sometimes a team wins the first time, and it's like, was that a good matchup, or maybe you got a couple turnovers, like it worked out for you. Maybe it was just you were hot that day or whatever. And sometimes it legitimately is a good matchup. I think it's a good matchup, but that does not mean that the Vikings can't win, because the Vikings have a good offense as well. So will the Vikings be able to outscore the Rams? To me, that's the best. What's the best strategy? Play zone or play man? I think it's score a lot of points on offense. So will they be able to do it? Well, you'll have to stay tuned for my next video to find out if I think they will. But yeah, those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from y'all. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.